Have you ever noticed how the river never forces its way to the ocean? How the moon never chases the night, yet it always finds its place? There is a rhythm to existence, a silent orchestration beyond our urgency, beyond our need to control. We live in a world that glorifies noise, constant motion, relentless pursuit, yet the most profound truths emerge in stillness. Silence is not the absence of life, it is where life gathers its wisdom. It is in the hush between notes that music finds its meaning. Perhaps the very things we chase are meant to arrive not by force but by flow. Perhaps our struggles are not barriers but brush strokes in a grander masterpiece, revealing their purpose only when we step back and allow the picture to form. There's something remarkable about silence. Not the awkward, empty kind that makes people fidget in conversations, but the kind that carries weight, the kind that exists between the words of a great speech, between the waves before they break, between the inhale and the exhale of life itself. That silence, the one filled with presence, with depth, with knowing, is where the most profound truths emerge. Yet we live in a world that fears silence, a world that confuses noise with importance. We are told to speak up, to chase, to fill the void with action, as if stillness were wasted time. But what if silence isn't absence? What if it's an invitation? What if, instead of pushing forward, we allowed ourselves to pause, to listen, not just to the world, but to something deeper? Think about the most powerful moments in life. They aren't the ones cluttered with words. They are the pauses. The moment just before you step onto a stage. The breath before you say, "I do." The seconds after hearing news that changes everything. Those moments, the ones we remember most, are wrapped in silence, and it's in that silence that something incredible happens. Awareness, clarity, truth. Silence is where wisdom lives. It's why the wisest people we know are often the quietest. They don't rush to speak. They don't fill space with empty words. They understand that silence is not inaction, it is presence. It is the ability to listen, not just with our ears, but with our whole being. Nature understands this better than we do. The sun doesn't announce its arrival, it simply rises. The trees don't chase the wind, they stand, and the wind finds them. The river never forces its way to the ocean, yet it always gets there. There is no desperation, no grasping, only movement in harmony with what already is. But we as people, we struggle with that. We want certainty, we want answers now. And in our rush to fill the gaps, we miss the wisdom that only silence can reveal. We ask a question, and before we've even sat with it, we demand a response. But the most profound answers don't come from forcing an outcome. They come when we give them space to arrive. Consider this. Some of the greatest breakthroughs in history, scientific discoveries, creative epiphanies, moments of deep personal realization, did not come in the middle of frantic searching. They came in stillness. Einstein didn't come up with a theory of relativity by grinding through equations all day. The idea came when he allowed himself to imagine, to be in a state of quiet reflection. The same is true for artists, musicians, and philosophers throughout history. The greatest insights arrive not in the noise, but in the pause. And yet we spend so much of our lives resisting silence. We fill our days with distractions, our minds with constant input, terrified of sitting with the unknown. But here's the paradox. The more we try to escape silence, the more we miss the very thing that will guide us forward. When we learn to embrace silence, something shifts. We become less reactive, more intentional. We stop responding to life out of habit and start moving through it with purpose. We begin to hear what we've been drowning out, our instincts, our intuition, the deeper knowing that has always been there waiting for us to listen, because silence is not empty. It is full of everything we've been too busy to notice. So the next time you feel the need to fill the space, to push for an answer, to chase what is already on its way, pause, sit in the silence, trust it, because in that silence, life is speaking. And if you listen closely, you'll realize it always has been. There's a rhythm to life, a natural order. It's everywhere. The way the seasons change without permission, the way the tide rises and falls as if it knows exactly where it belongs. Nothing in nature rushes, nothing forces, and yet everything happens exactly as it should. But we don't trust that rhythm. We want to control the outcome, speed up the process, force the answers. We convince ourselves that if we're not pushing, if we're not constantly moving, we're falling behind. So we chase, we grasp, we exhaust ourselves trying to bend life to our will. And in doing so, we disrupt the very flow that was already working in our favor. Have you ever noticed how the things you try the hardest to control are often the ones that seem just out of reach? A relationship that falls apart the more you try to hold it together. An opportunity that slips away the moment you start clinging to it. It's almost as if the universe is gently reminding us that some things aren't meant to be taken, they're meant to be received. When we stop resisting the natural flow of life, something interesting happens. Doors begin to open, not because we kicked them down, but because they were always meant to. The right people cross our paths, not because we forced the connection, but because we allowed space for it to happen. What is meant for us finds us not through force, but through alignment. Think about the best moments in your life, the ones that changed you, the ones that defined you. Chances are, they didn't come exactly when or how you planned. Maybe you stumbled into a career that you never imagined, but it turned out to be exactly where you were meant to be. Maybe a relationship ended, and in that space of uncertainty, something better arrives, something you never would have seen if you had kept holding on. That's the beauty of life's natural rhythm. It doesn't work on our timeline, and that's a good thing, because our idea of timing is often shaped by fear. Fear of missing out, fear of not being enough, fear of the unknown. But life doesn't operate on fear. It operates on trust, on flow, on an intelligence far greater than our own. Look at a river. It never fights to move forward. It doesn't struggle against the rocks in its path. It simply flows, adjusting, adapting, carving its way through obstacles, not by force, but by patience. And yet, no matter how many bends or barriers it encounters, it always finds its way to the ocean. Imagine if we lived that way. Imagine if instead of clinging to rigid plans and timelines, we trusted the unfolding. Imagine if we embraced the unknown, knowing that just because we can't see the full path doesn't mean it's not there. Now, that doesn't mean we sit back and do nothing. A river still moves, it still takes action, but it does so with trust, not desperation. We still show up, we still work, we still dream, but we don't panic when things don't happen on our schedule. We don't force what isn't ready. Because life has a rhythm, and the more we fight it, the more exhausted we become. But the moment we learn to trust that rhythm, to lean into it instead of against it, that's when life truly begins to flow. And here's the most fascinating part. The things that are truly meant for us, they never need to be chased. They will always find their way. We are obsessed with certainty. We crave it, we chase it, we convince ourselves that if we just had all the answers, we'd finally feel at peace. But life doesn't work that way. It never has. No one ever wakes up with a perfectly mapped out plan where every step makes sense from the start. And yet somehow, everything unfolds exactly as it should. Think about it. Look back on your own life. How many of the best things that ever happened to you were planned? How many of them were expected? Chances are, some of your most defining moments, the ones that shaped you, challenged you, transformed you, weren't part of the plan at all. They were surprises, detours, moments that didn't make sense at the time, but in hindsight, fit together like pieces of a puzzle you didn't even know you were solving. And that's the thing about trust. It's not about knowing the path. It's about walking it anyway. We struggle with that. We want guarantees before we take the first step. We hesitate, waiting for clarity before we move, as if certainty is a prerequisite for progress. But certainty is an illusion. The greatest things in life don't come with guarantees. They come with risk, with faith, with the willingness to step forward even when we don't know exactly where we're going. Think about a seed. It doesn't demand to know how tall it will grow before it starts to sprout. It simply roots itself in the soil, trusts the process, and allows nature to do its work. It doesn't panic when it's buried in darkness because it understands that growth begins where no one can see. And in time, without forcing, without rushing, it breaks through the surface and becomes exactly what it was meant to be. But we panic in the darkness. We question, we doubt, we convince ourselves that if we can't see immediate results, nothing is happening. We forget that most of life's transformations begin in silence, in patience, in the unseen. Just because you can't see the progress doesn't mean it isn't happening. Just because the path isn't clear doesn't mean it isn't leading you somewhere. And this is where trust comes in. Trust isn't passive. It's not about sitting back and waiting for things to happen. It's about showing up, taking the step, doing the work, and then allowing life to move in ways we may not yet understand. It's about accepting that not everything will make sense in the moment, but that doesn't mean it isn't meaningful. Some of the greatest minds, the most successful people, the ones who seem to move through life with purpose, aren't the ones who had it all figured out from the beginning. They're the ones who learned to trust the unfolding. They didn't demand to know the entire journey before they started walking. They moved forward step by step and let the path reveal itself in time. Because here's the truth. What is meant for you is already finding its way to you. It won't always arrive on your schedule, and it won't always look the way you imagine. But when you trust, and when you lean into the unknown instead of resisting it, you open yourself up to possibilities far greater than anything you could have planned. So, if you're waiting for certainty before you begin, you'll be waiting forever. But if you trust, if you take the step, even in the dark, you'll come to realize something remarkable. The path was always there, you just needed to walk it. There are moments in life that don't make sense. The setbacks, the disappointments, the unexpected detours. We like to think of these as interruptions, as if life was supposed to be going one way and suddenly something knocked us off course. We resist them, we fight them, we try to fix them as quickly as possible, desperate to get back to the path we thought we were supposed to be on. But what if those moments weren't interruptions at all? What if they were part of the design? Think about music. The beauty of a song isn't just in the notes that are played, it's in the spaces between them. Without silence, without pause, without contrast, music would just be noise. The moments of tension, the unexpected shifts, the quiet rests, these are what make a melody meaningful. And yet, in our own lives, we do everything we can to avoid them. We want life to be a straight line, a predictable, uninterrupted series of wins. But that's not how anything truly beautiful is created. No great story is without struggle, no masterpiece is without contrast, and no person, no matter how successful, no matter how fulfilled, has lived a life free of challenges. The things we call obstacles are not separate from our journey. They are the journey. They are the movements in the grand symphony, shaping us, refining us, giving our story depth. The hard moments, the silent seasons, the things that don't go as planned. These are not signs that something has gone wrong. They are signs that something is unfolding, but we don't see that right away. In the moment, challenges feel like roadblocks. They make us doubt ourselves. They make us question if we're even on the right path. And in that uncertainty, we have two choices. We can fight against them, exhausting ourselves, trying to control something that was never meant to be controlled, or we can listen, we can lean in, we can ask, what is this here to teach me? Because every setback carries a lesson. Every challenge is an invitation, and the people who move through life with the most wisdom, the most clarity, the most peace, are not the ones who avoided difficulty. They're the ones who learned from it. Think about the most powerful people in history, the ones who changed the world in ways no one saw coming. None of them had an easy road. None of them got where they were without moments of doubt, failure, and struggle. But instead of resisting those moments, they embraced them. They understood that hardship wasn't a detour. It was part of the masterpiece being created. And that applies to us too. The moments we label as difficult are often the ones that shape us in ways we never could have planned. They introduce us to strengths we didn't know we had. They prepare us for opportunities we weren't even aware existed. They force us to pause, to reflect, to recalibrate, so that when we do move forward, we move forward not just with more knowledge, but with more wisdom. So the next time life doesn't go the way you expected, take a step back, breathe, recognize that just because you don't understand the moment now doesn't mean it isn't meaningful. You are part of something far greater than you can see. And just like in music, just like in art, just like in every beautiful thing ever created, the contrast, the tension, the unexpected pauses, these are the very things that make the masterpiece complete. One day you'll look back and realize that what felt like a roadblock was actually the bridge that led you exactly where you were meant to be. We spend so much of our lives chasing success, chasing love, chasing happiness, as if they are things that exist outside of us, just slightly out of reach, and if we just run fast enough, work hard enough, push hard enough, we'll finally catch them. But the irony is, the more we chase, the further they seem to slip away. Think about it. Have you ever wanted something so badly that you did everything in your power to make it happen, only to watch it fall apart? Have you ever gripped onto a relationship, a job, an opportunity so tightly that it eventually crumbled under the weight of your own fear of losing it? We've all done it. Because we've been taught that effort equals results, that if we just do more, we'll get more. But sometimes doing more is the very thing that pushes what we want further away. It's like trying to catch a butterfly. Run after it and it flutters just out of reach. But sit still, be present, and eventually it lands on your shoulder. That's not to say that we shouldn't take action. Of course, we should, but there's a difference between action rooted in fear and action rooted in trust. Fear makes us desperate. Trust makes us magnetic. When we live in a constant state of pursuit, we are telling ourselves, whether we realize it or not, that what we seek is not already on its way to us, that we have to fight for it, that if we stop running, we will lose. But life does not work that way. The most meaningful things don't come because we grasp at them. They come because we are open enough to receive them. Look at nature. The sun does not rush to rise, the ocean does not chase the shore, the trees do not strain to grow, and yet everything happens exactly when and how it is meant to. Nothing in nature is in a hurry, and yet everything is accomplished. So why do we believe that we are any different? We are constantly looking ahead, reaching for the next thing, thinking that once we get there, then we will be happy, then we will be fulfilled. But every time we arrive, we realize there is yet another thing to chase, another milestone, another goal, and we never actually arrive at peace. Because peace isn't something we find in the future. It is something we allow ourselves to feel in the present. That doesn't mean we shouldn't have goals. It doesn't mean we shouldn't dream. It means that we should not become so consumed by where we think we need to be that we miss where we are. Because here's the truth. The things meant for us are not running away. They are making their way to us at their own pace, in their own time. The love we seek, the success we desire, the clarity we crave, it's already on its way. But if we are too busy chasing, too distracted by the illusion that we must force it to happen, we may not even recognize it when it arrives. So, what if instead of chasing, we allowed? What if instead of grasping, we trusted? What if, for once, we stopped running toward a life that was always meant to come to us? Because the moment we stop believing we have to fight for what is already ours, that's the moment everything starts to fall into place. We live in a world that tells us to keep moving, to keep striving, to always be in pursuit of something. More success, more recognition, more certainty. We're taught that if we slow down, we'll fall behind. If we're not constantly proving our worth, we'll somehow lose it. And so we fill every moment with noise, with distractions, with endless activity, convinced that stillness is the enemy of progress. But what if the opposite were true? What if stillness wasn't a sign of passivity, but of power? What if silence wasn't an absence, but a presence? Think about the wisest people you've ever met, the ones who move through life with a quiet confidence, who seem to have an unshakable sense of peace, who don't react impulsively but instead respond with clarity and depth. They are not the loudest in the room, they do not rush to fill silence with words. They are the ones who have learned that in the quiet something deeper speaks. But most of us don't listen. Because listening requires patience. It requires trust. It requires us to be comfortable with the unknown, to sit with questions instead of demanding immediate answers. And that's uncomfortable. So we drown out the silence. We fill the spaces with distractions, with mindless scrolling, with constant busyness. We convince ourselves that if we just keep moving, we'll find what we're looking for. But clarity doesn't come from more noise. It comes from learning to be still. And that's not easy, because silence reveals things. It shows us the fears we've been avoiding, the truths we haven't been willing to face, but it also gives us something we can't find anywhere else, the wisdom that comes when we stop reacting and start listening. Great decisions aren't made in chaos, they aren't made in fear or in the pressure of urgency. They come when we step back, when we pause long enough to hear the things we were too busy to notice. The best leaders, the best thinkers, the most fulfilled people, they're the ones who understand that action is important, but so is stillness. That doing has power, but so does being. Think about nature. The ocean doesn't fight to reflect the sky, it becomes still and the reflection appears. A tree doesn't force its growth, it remains rooted, trusting the seasons, and it flourishes in time. The most profound movements in the universe happen in silence. The turning of the earth, the growing of life, the unfolding of the stars. And yet we resist silence, we fear it, because we've been conditioned to equate stillness with stagnation. But silence is not the absence of movement, it is the space in which everything aligns. It is where understanding deepens, where intuition sharpens, where life begins to come toward us instead of us chasing after it. So what if we allowed more silence? What if we stopped filling every moment with noise and trusted that what we seek will come, not through force, but through presence? Because the truth is, everything we are searching for, clarity, wisdom, direction, is already trying to find us, but it can only reach us when we are still enough to receive it.